Hindsight, the ad was ludicrously overpaid for a caretaking job. Live-in caretaker needed for remote estate. Generous compensation, discretion preferred. Discretion about what? Dust levels, the number of squirrels. But with nothing tying me down and a bank account gasping like a fish on a dock, I ignored the oddities. By the end of the interview, which consisted more of the lawyer, Mr. Alcott, reassuring me of the quiet nature of the job than asking about my qualifications, I was hired. They were desperate, I figured. So was I. The estate was less a grand mansion and more a sprawling relic that time forgot. My first drive up to the property was under a sky gray enough to be indifferent. The manor loomed, all sharp angles and shadows made sharper by the wild, untamed overgrowth around it. The closest neighbor was too far away in case you screamed, I amused myself thinking. But really, it was too remote. The air smelled wet, like moss had finally overtaken everything, even the air. Spencer, the groundskeeper with a permanent furrow between his brows, showed me around. His instructions were drowned under the rustling of leaves and distant thunder. He handed over the duties like passing a baton in a race he was too tired of running. "They'll probably send you a list. They always do," he said, squinting towards the manor as if expecting it to burst into accusatory flames. "A list?" I asked. "Rules." "For your stay," he said, then walked away into the creeping fog that seemed too eager to swallow him up. That evening, after unpacking some essentials and turning a deaf ear to the floorboards that seemed to groan in protest with every step, I found the list. It was right there on the ancient, scarred dining room table, 10 rules, typed out with an old-fashioned typewriter, the ink slightly smudged. 1. Do not open the windows after sunset. 2. Avoid the library at night. It disturbs the books. 3. If you hear music from the ballroom, do not attempt to find its source. 4. Leave the mirror in the main hallway, covered between 2-3 a.m. 5. Never answer the front door between midnight and dawn. 6. Do not investigate the cellar. Leave whatever sounds you hear undisturbed. 7. Keep the old oak door in the west wing, locked at all times. 8. Should you find any doors or windows open in the morning, close them without looking outside. 9. Never extinguish more than 3 candles if the power goes out. Darkness is safer. 10. Remember, you are not alone here. Act accordingly. Standing there, amidst the echoes of a house that creaked with sighs and whispers, the list didn't just feel meticulous. It felt menacing, a grocery list of precautions against an array of invisible, gnawing threats. The strangeness of the rules unsettled me, prodding at my sense of comfort with cold, bony fingers. I laughed, loud and hollow, trying to drown out the unease creeping up my spine. Maybe it was a prank, I thought, something to scare the new guy. But as the grandfather clock in the hall chimed a solemn, brooding 10, the humor drained from the situation. Curious and cautious, I reread the 4th rule and approached the main hallway. There it was, a mirror, large and framed with ornate silver, draped with a heavy black cloth. The absurdity of it tickled a weird part of my brain. Driven by a mix of rebellion and disbelief, I reached out. My hand trembled slightly as the cloth felt colder, heavier than I anticipated. Just as my watch beeped the hour, 2 a.m., I pulled the cover down. The reflection that met my eyes was my own, all pale and wide-eyed. I exhaled, about to laugh at my own silliness once more before I noticed it. The background behind my reflection didn't match the hallway. It was a room, dark and blurred, but unmistakably not the place I stood. Something in that room, a darker silhouette, twitched and began to turn slowly. Yanking the cloth back over the mirror, breath ragged, I backed away. The chills that raced down my back felt like warning shots. Every part of me screamed to run, to leave and never return, but the memory of my dry bank account and the warning that I wasn't alone rooted me to the spot. Someone or something didn't want me looking back from that other side. Swallowing hard, I decided I couldn't leave, not yet. Ignorance might be bliss, but tonight it seemed far more dangerous. The icy sensation lingered on my spine like unwanted fingers as I edged away from the draped mirror. Despite the pull of primal fear urging me to flee, curiosity, that perverse guardian of my every poor decision, anchored my feet. I could not leave this forsaken house, not with whispers slithering into my ears from shadows nestled in every corner. My heart beat a frantic tattoo against my ribs, synchronizing eerily with a clock somewhere chiming midnight. The air thickened as if it sensed my resolve, and the once faint murmurs blossomed into a low, cacophonous drone. It was as if the house itself were groaning under the weight of a long-held sorrow. With each step away from the mirror, the floorboards whimpered, synchronizing with my quickening pulse. I should have turned on the lights, but something about the starkness of bulb light seemed an injustice to the unfolding secrets. Instead, my fingers found the stubby end of a candle on a mantelpiece, and with shaking hands, I lit it. The flame, more blue than yellow, cast eerie shadows that danced like specters along the walls. As I held the candle aloft, its feeble light fell upon a line of framed photographs along the hallway, faces from times long past, eyes that seemed to follow. My gaze caught on a picture, the frame more ornate than the others. A family portrait, perhaps from a century ago, a stern couple with 2 children. Oddly, one of the children's faces was scratched out, an act of anger or deep sorrow, executed with such force that it had scarred the underlying wood of the frame. The house shifted around me, a creak here, a sigh there. Normal sounds I would have dismissed on any other night, but here now they felt like communications. Whose face had been erased from the photograph? And why did I feel the child's unseen eyes on me, accusing icy? The temperature dropped, or perhaps it was my growing fear manifesting as cold. I hugged my arms around myself, candle held out like a talisman, and moved deeper into the house. With each room I entered, the aging wallpaper, the heavy, musty drapes, the antique furniture spoke of years, decades, maybe centuries of occupancy and memories soaked into the very fabric of the space. I turned into what seemed to be a study. Books lined the walls, thick tomes that smelled of mildew and mothballs. A large desk sat under a window, moonlight casting its beams like a spotlight onto the dust-covered surface. There, amidst various papers and an old-fashioned inkwell, was a diary. The leather was cracked, the pages yellowed. Compelled by a need to understand, I flipped the diary open. The handwriting was looped and elegant, but the words danced with insanity. Desperate mentions of seeing too much in the glass and the eyes that we must not meet scratched across the pages. My breath hitched as I read a passage dated exactly 100 years to this night. We covered the mirrors tonight. We must never uncover them. He's in there, waiting. A sharp crack like breaking glass shattered the heavy silence of the room. My head snapped up, heart throttling my chest. It had come from back down the hallway, near the covered mirror. With the diary pressed against my chest, the candle my only shield, I crept back toward the sound. Each step seemed louder, more pronounced. The air grew increasingly frigid, the candle's flame flickering with my unsteady breath. Near the mirror, the cloth I had replaced was on the floor, the mirror now exposed. In its reflection, under the quivering light, I saw not my own face, but the smudged outline of a figure, a shadow within a shadow. The figure was hunched, grotesque, its features distorted and wrong. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice a mere thread of sound. The figure shifted, its head tilting as if considering my question, or perhaps considering me. The candle flickered once more, a draft teasing the flame, and then the light was gone, snuffed out, leaving me in suffocating darkness with the palpable sense of being not alone. Not alone at all. The last thing I remember before the fear overtook me was the feel of eyes, countless eyes, watching from the dark, from the glass, from behind me. Breath hushed, I pawed blindly for the matches I dropped somewhere among the clutter of the table. A futile scramble with my fingers skittering like crickets on the old wood surface. My heart hammered against ribs, heavy, dreading the stirring silence that suddenly thickened around me. Each creak of the house, each sigh from the aged beams, felt laden with intent, as if the shadows themselves beckoned closer still. My hand brushed against the cold, smooth surface of the candle holder, and desperate relief washed over me briefly before another sound cut sharply through the room. A low, rumbled dragging like fabric over dirt, circling ever closer. It was a sound born from nightmares, dressed in reality's threadbare cloak. I froze, skin pimpling, breath locked in my throat. The silence returned, oppressive, mocking the sudden race of my pulse. It beat a frantic tempo in my ears, a morbid drumming against the quietude. In the blindness, my thoughts spun wild. The articles on the mantel, the room's familiar scents, Moffat's old carpet that scratched at ankles, it all conspired to anchor me to the spot even as panic urged me to flee. That was until the air shifted again, movement, a near-silent whisper of movement, just beyond my reach. I could feel it, an unsettling nearness that should not have been. I mustered the nerve to inch forward, arms stretched, seeking the mant. Where more candles stood. My hand trembled as it found purchase. Candle wax under fingertips finally gave me slight comfort. The scrape of a match sounded unnaturally severe as I struck it violently, the sudden flare briefly illuminating someone in the corner of the room's periphery. Or did it? The matchstick's glow trembled with my hand, casting deceptive shadows, but had there been eyes? I couldn't be sure, as the light died too swiftly, plunging me again into an even darker void. The imagination of eyes lingered, though, burned eerily onto the insides of my eyelids. Attempting another match, my shaking worsened. The small wooden stick snapped, its head flicking into obscurity. Panic rose like bile. Surrounded by incipient mists of terror, my breathing hastened, each exhalation a fog in the chill air. I felt it then, an unmistakable brush against my neck. Not quite fingers, not quite air, more like the tickle of moth wings, ephemeral and yet horrifyingly tangible. Shuddering with revulsion, my hand finally gripped another match. Striking it against any hard surface I could manage, the light snapped alive with a hiss. Held aloft, the small flame was a tiny beacon, but now there was nothing. Only furniture in its usual array, nothing amiss except the candle I held, an island in a sea of darkness. Yet the certainty of being watched did not abate, and my skin prickled with cold sweat. Caution bordering on cowardice kept me rooted, my back to the wall as if it could somehow ward off the things that crawled through my imagination. The match's flame licked my fingertips, burning, and with a sharp inhale of pain, I dropped it. Darkness swaddled me once more. It was then a sound pierced the silence, a soft, almost inarticulate murmur. It came from the other side of the room where the shadows lay thickest. Hesitant but driven, I approached. My foot caught on something, that damned rug, sending me sprawling forward, hands outstretched. My palms met the floor with a dull thud, but there it was again, closer this time, a whisper undeniably real and utterly indecipherable. Heart in throat, I rose slowly, eyes straining against the void when another sound stopped me. Not a murmur, not a drag, but a sharp, rapid clicking, like nails tapping Morse code against glass. Frozen, I listened as the tapping grew more insistent. The horror that no mundane night could bring bore down upon my chest with stifling weight. And as my name seemed to seep from the sheer blackness, whispered so faintly, it might as well have been the house speaking. I understood the visceral truth of primal fear, alone yet encircled by unseen gazes. The whisper of my name lingered in the air like a chill, resolving into a breath against the nape of my neck. Unseen, the presence prowled at the edges of my awareness, palpable yet formless. The walls of my old family house seemed to tighten, the shadows melding into darker shades, as if stained by the night itself. There was no denying it now. The tapping, the whisper, these were meant for me. My legs trembled as I resolved to confront whatever haunted the darkness. The house groaned under the wind's caress, a sound mournful enough to be a lament. With every footstep toward the hallway, the floorboards creaked, protesting my intrusion into a night that no longer felt my own. My fingers brushed against the wall, seeking the reassurance of solidity. Cold sweat mingled with dust along the wallpaper's faded floral pattern, its texture a grotesque mimicry of decayed flesh under my touch. I paused at the threshold of the living room, the place where shadows pooled deepest, thick and suffocating. The air felt thicker here, resistant, as if I were wading through an invisible morass. My breath came in shallow tugs, my body instinctively knew to fear the suffocation of this darkness. Squinting, I could discern the outline of the old grandfather clock, its pendulum silent, as though time itself dared not tread in this forsaken hour. Then the tapping resumed, louder than before, a desperate, rhythmic clatter coming from the vicinity of the fireplace. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer. Each tap was a metallic echo, chilling in its clarity. My gaze fixed on a small, decayed, leather-bound book lying in the heart of the cold, ashes-filled hearth. How it came to be there, I couldn't recall. Compelled by a mixture of dread and urgency, I reached out, fingers grazing the book's spine, and the instant I touched it, the air around me snapped cold. The room spun, a carousel of dark silhouettes, and an icy silence filled the space. Then, the profound stillness shattered by a growl so deep and guttural, it seemed not to come from within the house, but from the bowels of the earth itself. Whirling around, my back slammed against the mantel, eyes wide, scanning for any sign of the beast that owned that growl. But there was nothing. Only the oppressive darkness, watching, waiting. The book's weight in M. My hands felt like a leaden anchor as I considered its possible origins. Perhaps a forgotten relic of my grandfather, a man whose own stories had teetered on the edges of the arcane and the obscure. Cautiously, I opened the cover. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded to nearly illegible whispers of text. I strained in the dim light to read, but only one phrase was clear, repeated over and over across the pages. Do not seek what was taken. A floorboard creaked upstairs. The abrupt sound severed my focus, jerking my head upward to the ceiling where darkness pooled even darker than before. It wasn't the benign creak of a house settling, but a deliberate, heavy step. Something was moving with slow, methodical intent. My name whispered once more, this time louder, urgent. It was no longer a mere breath, it was a call. That singular moment of clarity struck me. Whatever roamed this house, whatever lingered in these shadows, it was tied to the cryptic warning in this book. The realizations piled swift and heavy upon my chest. I was in the heart of something ancient, something that had perhaps claimed my grandfather and now beckoned to me, binding me to a chain of events set long before my innocent childhood games in these dusty rooms. The pacing of unseen feet grew quicker, descending the staircase now, immediate and predatory. My pulse thundered in my ears, a frantic drummer calling to arms. Yet my legs refused the command to flee, rooted to the spot by an amalgam of fear and a desperate need to understand. And then, eerily distinct among the shadows at the bottom of the stairs, two gleaming points like eyes caught the thin light. They blinked, slow, deliberate, watching, waiting, calculating. If the darkness had a visage, it was surely this.